Slumlord Bob here. This is our second episode. We're going to delve into the second murder at the same house as we described in our first episode. Yeah, 2 murders, same house. But first, just a little more about murder number 1, John's murder. Well, after John's murder, his 3 roommates immediately moved out. Unfortunately, we'll never know which 1, 2, or 3 of the roommates were, might I say, affiliated with the drugs and John's murder. Hey, let me share this with you. I once asked a policeman how many murders are solved and unsolved. He wouldn't tell me. Well, his response produced a feeling within me that there's a huge number of unsolved murders, not only across the United States, but the world. And I regret to say, in John's case, there was a neighbor who saw a car stop near John's house, a man leave the car, go to the front porch of John's house, and who heard shots minutes later from within the house. The neighbor then saw the car return, saw the man run out of the house, step into the car, and saw the car speed away down the street. I talked with this neighbor, who told me the police asked very few questions concerning this unfortunate event, as did one of John's roommates, who was still the leaseholder, even though he had moved out several months prior to the murder to another neighborhood to reside with some members of his family. When I asked him the same thing. Well, good grief, one of the roommates must be affiliated with the drugs, the stash, and the murderer. But we will never know. Years later, it's one of many unsolved murders. Well, the house stood vacant for 6 months due to the sinister, macabre vibes that I sensed each time I drove by, which was less than infrequent. Well, you know, landlords don't like having any property sitting vacant. So, 6 months later, I resigned myself to inspect the interior, clean, and make any necessary repairs for the next tenant. Well, I asked myself, how did I react upon entering that house? Maybe I could describe it as like vicarious dread, followed by a bunch of horrific, desperate fear. The pain when he was beaten, shot, left there dying. Well, let me tell you, the murder of a young tenant is the landlord's nadir, the low point of a supposed responsibility to provide a clean, safe home for all tenants. Well, there was no resurrection for John, and there was no suspect captured, found guilty, and sentenced to life imprisonment for John's murder. These emotions had their way as they clenched my stomach, chest, my throat, all tightened. For when I entered the front door and took a few steps into the living room, I was confronted by a large, roundish, dark blood stain, a yard in diameter on the area rug. Also a large, brushed, streaked blood stain on the wall just inside the doorway of his bedroom, made when stumbling, leaning against the wall while either entering or leaving. I'm not sure which. Let me tell you, I rerun a visualized memory of this scene way too often, so it's best now to leave it at that and move on. So 6 months later, and after a week of heavy cleaning, painting, and landscaping the outside, I rented the house to a young couple and their infant son. The husband worked in the kitchen of a restaurant, washing dishes and doing general janitorial work, while the wife was a part-time worker as a server at another restaurant. Well, time passed, and about a year later, the husband unfortunately lost his job at the restaurant, while his wife continued to work part-time as a server. Their rent payments began arriving late without the mandatory late fee. Well, I respect the adage that a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. So I accepted the rent without the late fee. Be that as it may, within a few months, 4 or 5 months, their rent payments transitioned from being a few days late to a few weeks late. Well, I do my best to transact only win-win agreements with my tenants. I receive a nominal monthly rent, and the tenant receives a safe, clean home with stove, refrigerator, and adequate heating and air conditioning systems. The deposit fee, which is equal to 1 month of rent, never, let me repeat, never covers the cost of losing a tenant who falls behind in the rent and is thereby evicted. So I did my best by accepting their late payments and even communicated with the husband's mother, who paid their last 2 months' rent before the inevitable eviction became final. Well, listeners, if I might inject a little side story at this time, lo and behold, about 6 weeks prior to the eviction, I had met the wife's teenage sister who helped the couple with babysitting duties. Sam, my maintenance man, and I had driven to their house to repair some shingles blown loose during a rain and windstorm. And it only takes a few missing shingles to cause a roof leak, as the one in their bedroom, when you know, right above their bed. Well, Sam thinks of himself as Studley Sam, the maintenance man, and I may as well say he is trenchantly erotic. He has a way, fantastically fetching to many girls. Frankly, if he weren't such a good worker, I wouldn't want him in my little world of repairs, for his ways may cause some legal issues involving not only him, but me. So don't you know, when he stepped off the ladder, after replacing the missing shingles, he immediately went into the house to chat with the wife's sister, while I climbed up on the roof to check the repairs. Like I said, Sam does good work. Everything was fine, so we loaded the ladder, tar, nails, and extra shingles, and left the husband, wife, and sister within an hour's time. About 4 weeks after we had made these repairs, Rebecca, oh, by the way, that's the sister's name, Rebecca calls me and straightforward tells me she's pregnant and she needs the phone number, Sam's phone number, because he is clearly the father of her unborn child. What am I getting into? Well, I know slumlords have a bad reputation for not giving a damn about their tenants. Well, that's a damn lie as far as I'm concerned, because I care. Thus, I immediately transformed myself from Slumlord Bob to Counselor Bob. I began by stating clearly to Rebecca that Studley Sam is not going to be a father. An erotic sperm donor, yes, but not a father with any positive attributes. Most likely, Sam will be an absent without leave father. So I suggested she have a plan for being a single mom with somewhere between 0 and a minuscule amount of financial and emotional support from Sam. I could tell by Rebecca's voice that she called me not only wanting Sam's phone number, but also answers to other questions. Answer to questions of tremendous human significance and consequence. So I gave her Sam's phone number, and I then went on to say that if I were a woman, that I would be extremely careful to have, share, and raise my child only with a man who embraced strongly the values of honesty, compatibility, sexual attraction, the ability to provide food, shelter, and clothing, loyalty, faithfulness, and the love which motivates the sharing of these values with you, Rebecca. Well, I wasn't sure if I was going to hear again from Rebecca, but I did. About 4 weeks later, she called, and maybe I'm just perceiving this, but her voice was calmer, more relaxed, tinged with a little remorse. After what she told me, I figured why. She said that she was no longer pregnant. I didn't ask her if it was voluntary or involuntary. With an emotionless monotone, she simply stated that she was no longer pregnant. She thanked me for talking about it with her, and I told her I felt glad for her, and that was the end of the conversation. And you know what? Slumlord Bob is extremely grateful that he has a chance in his own way to help people asking for help. They don't always ask for help. Some of my tenants resent help. They say, I'm not their daddy. They're not in school anymore. Attitudes which prevent improvement of one's life. I can only help those who seek it out, whether they ask for it or listen while given unsolicitedly by me or someone else. Well, hey everybody, time's up. I've been talking for 10 minutes and I haven't yet mentioned anything pertaining to the second murder which happened after this younger couple was evicted and I had rented the same house to a new tenant. The next murder, murder number 2, is unique. It's a one of a kind. But as for now, we have an interval of time. Think of it as a suspension bridge. Imagine the view. And we'll get you off with episode 3. Bye-bye.